Not what I was trying to do. Right. Because I can fucking. Where was we? Where was we? Inside a second. Yep. That's it. Oh, that killed everything, didn't it? Oh, yeah. You got it fucked up, didn't you? Okay. Wait. Let's lower this down to 4080. 480. Come on. 480. Let's do it. It's at 480. Stable while on filmmaker light effects. Just fucking go. Let's start from the beginning. Oh, fuck yeah. Ah. Properties, right? Yeah.
So I try and stick all of them inside one case.
Oh, I mean, this is like a bad story, but
Yeah, I want to hear all the stories.
well, my dad was making iPod ads, and so they go to young people, and he cast a bunch of people from my high school.
Okay, so I'm just going to put scientific researcher, Nepo.
I know it's like the worst way you could possibly start the interview.
Thank you. I'm a professional. Studied anthropology and chemistry at University of Chicago. Worked for a little known magazine called Vice Magazine, including the piece in 2008, The Magic Jews. What was that about, honey?
This was one of many early Vice pieces that I did. I started out just writing for the magazine. This was one about Hasidic Jews who were leaving their Orthodox homes or Hasidic homes in Brooklyn using psychedelics. Early Vice piece.
That was a fantastic one, and led to more and more writing. You've also written for Harper's, but you've done field work in Mexico, Africa, South America, all over the world. Really,
That's
we're going to get into.
six.
There's a lot of stories I love and I find crazy. I'm a huge fan, and I wanted to get you out here to talk about stuff. And in full disclosure, we talked about a lot of stuff, and it breaks my heart because it was all gold. And now I don't know if we can recreate it, but we're going to try today.
We only scratched the surface.
We only scratched the surface. Hamilton Morris. Here we go. I want to do a springboard because in my brain, forever etched with your name, is that documentary in the DRC.
We're 4 hours outside Kinshasa. We're about to enter a weed field that may contain either Congo red or Congo black. Because it's so close to the city, we don't know if the genetics will have been contaminated, but this is our first stop on the journey, and it'll be interesting to see what these fields contain.
It's kind of like Heart of Darkness. You're going deeper and deeper. It's getting more and more dangerous. It's getting weirder and weirder.
A gesture of trust to allow somebody to shave my entire body and possess the hairs afterwards.
And you're looking for rare strains of weed. It was a particular, that doesn't make you hungry. It was an appetite suppressant strain.
And this was the idea.
Yeah. And I remember it because it was a beautiful shoot, like physically beautiful, like it looked beautiful. And you were very heroic.
The head of the boat, he's looking for potentially deadly hippopotamuses and crocodiles. This is all turning out to be much more difficult and extreme than I expected.
And you kept going, and then you finally find it, and it's a great doc, and then the guy died. You literally risked your life to find rare strains of weed. Go.
That was one of many, that was the norm. You know very well the norm.
Well, that's a springboard.
Yeah. So many of these shoots did entail risk of one kind or another. I try not to belabor it because it feels slightly corny to talk about. To talk about the risks that you take to do these sorts of things. But yeah, when we were on this voyage through the DRC, one of the people who was a local almost died from malaria, and that during the shoot was frightening. And then one of the major subjects of the piece, this guy Franco, who was a real swashbuckling explorer type ex-military, who was a real tough guy, and tragically got malaria and died not very long after the shoot.
Was it a rare form of malaria? Like, why couldn't he get to a hospital? And
I think it was a combination of things. It had entered his brain, which is how it tends to kill people, and by the time it was caught, it was too late. I think that he didn't go to the hospital until things were very advanced, and it's very tragic.
Yeah. So DRC, one of the scariest countries in the world. Where else have we gone in search of psychotropic substances? Give me your top 10.
Oh, I mean, South Africa, Gabon.
So hold on. South Africa, what were we doing in South Africa?
Well, this was one of my favorite projects to ever work on with Vice. This was kind of, it wasn't the pilot for Pharmacopoeia, but it was one of the first big stories that we did in the first season, where in South Africa, there was this very insane legacy of chemical and biological weapon development in the apartheid government.
Good to meet you.
I learned the unique history of the South African Quaalude is inextricably linked to a secret government program.
One of the most bizarre and conspiratorial and strange things that may have occurred was there was a physician named Wouter Basson who was in charge of creating chemical weapons for the apartheid government, and a lot of his research was oriented toward attempts to weaponize recreational drugs like MDMA and Quaalude. And they claimed that they were tableting vast quantities of Quaalude to place in Quaalude grenades that would be used for crowd control. This is not a joke, by the way.
Wait.
Yeah.
You throw a grenade and it releases Quaalude?
It's a grenade full of Quaalude tablets. Very, very weird. And we actually called the pharmacist who was in charge of the tableting operation, and he threatened to kill us while we were working on all this, yeah.
The Quaaludes don't kill you by ripping you to pieces. You just see a yellow pill that's been thrown in a grenade and eat it?
The idea, to the best of my understanding, was that the Quaalude grenades would explode Quaalude vapor or particulate into a crowd and sedate everyone in such a way that it could be used as a crowd control measure.
Methaqualone was one of the substances that was manufactured with the intention of crowd control. Now, if you think about it, how can you control an unruly crowd with methaqualone? You cannot fly over them and disseminate methaqualone over the crowd. But possibly you can start by getting the crowd hooked on methaqualone.
This was the supposed idea, but there's another reading of all this, which is that there were no Quaalude grenades, that it's exactly as ridiculous as it sounds, and that this was all cover for a massive state-sponsored drug dealing operation, that they were selling the Quaalude.
Have you ever done a Quaalude?
Oh, yeah.
What is it like? How?
Yeah, I hate to deflate the Quaalude by being because it has such a romantic reputation. People are so excited by it, and I hate to be a Quaalude naysayer and say that it's really not that amazing. It's nice, it's a powerful muscle relaxant, makes you feel very calm, it's an enjoyable effect. But I think part of it has to do with the fact that it doesn't exist anymore. It's rarefied, it's special. And
why doesn't it exist?
There's actually a couple really good reasons. When you're trying to understand trends in the drug market, you often have to think about the chemistry of the drug. That's the ultimate explanation for why things do or don't exist. So with a drug like LSD, a single chemist working in a single lab can easily produce millions of doses, easily, if they know what they're doing, and it won't take them very long. Something like Quaalude is a very weak drug by weight. It's a powerful drug if you take a few tablets, but in terms of each milligram of molecule, there is very little drug. So 1 gram of methaqualone is only 3 doses. So one person can't really make that much Quaalude. It's not possible. The economics don't work out. So unless you're selling them for $40 a tablet or something like that, it doesn't make sense. It made sense when pharmaceutical companies were making them, but from the perspective of illicit underground manufacture, it's a little weird unless there's a huge demand for it like there is in South Africa.
Why did the pharmaceutical company stop making it?
There was supposedly overprescribing and problems with addiction. It was sort of like its own version of the opioid epidemic, where everyone's free. Actually, Ben Stein wrote an early Quaalude scare, a book about the dangers of Quaalude here that's never talked about.
Really? And who were they prescribing it to? Who was overprescription to?
Everyone, probably. I mean, it's a nice drug. Sedatives of that nature solve a lot of problems for people. They allow you to sleep, they treat muscle pain, they calm you down if you're stressed out. I mean, people like those kinds of drugs.
What did it get replaced by, Quaaludes?
Effectively, Xanax, Klonopin, Valium, all those things just took the place. And they're very similar drugs, and they're probably slightly safer. So that's...
What was the danger of Quaaludes?
The standard dangers that most of those drugs have. If you consume too much, it's a respiratory suppressant, it can cause respiratory arrest, it can cause you to go into a coma. If you become addicted and then rapidly discontinue use, you could have a seizure, kind of the typical stuff that you encounter with benzodiazepines, but a bit more extreme.
South Africa, grenades that distribute benzos.
So this was the idea that we were investigating, and it sounds like one of these Gary Webb type, did the CIA introduce crack into Compton conspiracies, but in South Africa, there's really strong evidence that something like that might have happened. I'm not saying that it definitely happened, but the evidence is
The government is dealing Quaaludes.
You had the government pressing enormous quantities of Quaalude tablets. Like this truly and indisputably was happening, and Wouter Basson, the person who was the head of this program, was arrested selling drugs himself off of his own person in a park.
Football season is upon us, and this season, we've teamed up with BetMGM. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we have special offers for our listeners every single week. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code SHANE, that's Shaney, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Just make sure you use bonus code SHANE when you sign up. And don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code SHANE and get up to $1,500 first bet offer today. That's one. Give me two. So I want your top 10. That's just one.
Top 10.
Top 10. I said you've been all around the world.
Yeah.
Number 2 was South Africa. Then you said Gabon and something else.
Cameroon. Yeah. Iboga, something that you know about yourself, where you did an early report on Ibogaine that was very influential.
Felt like my family, but nobody had ever seen or recognized.
So you probably heard that there's an entire religion that is oriented around the worship of this. It's a syncretic Christian religion where they conceptualize the iboga tree as the tree of knowledge of good and evil in Genesis. And it's half Christian, half other traditions. It involves mermaids, it involves soldiers. Like they have, it's very theatrical. You have like soldiers that carry wooden guns to ward off evil, like to shoot evil spirits and all this stuff, and they bury people alive with their heads protruding from the ground.
This is in real life, not in the drug.
Yeah, in real life.
Yeah.
Well, but both, actually. They give somebody the drug, bury them, and leave them in the ground overnight with their heads sticking out to look at the stars and contemplate their own mortality. Yeah, pretty amazing stuff.
Did you do it?
I did do it. I didn't get buried, although I would be open to it.
And what I've heard about Ibogaine, so Ibogaine, we did a thing on, and basically I became fascinated by it because it's one of the only treatments that seemingly can cure addiction to heroin. And a lot of people who had just no other, they tried everything and it didn't work and whatever, and they would do Ibogaine and like they're off it, kind of thing. And almost 100% success rate for the people granted it wasn't huge, it was like 10 to 50 people. Very similar stories, which I found interesting, which is they go and they see their timeline and they see, their ancestors, and in some cases their, I don't know what predecessors, people that are going to be, in the future, and they're saying, they sit you down and sort of give you a very logical explanation of why you shouldn't be doing this, which I find to be like wild that it would be one person's, let alone very similar trips, and then they wake up and they have no craving. So I found that to be magical, and we followed it and went to Africa, and it was a fascinating story. So you went there, and what did you do?
Well, I'm very interested in this idea of how these traditions evolve, because it would seem that this religion has existed for, let's say, at least 100 years, probably many hundreds of years. People always say that it started with pygmy people, but there's a distinct lack of anthropological work with actual pygmy people, at least as far as I'm aware of. And so the origins of it are slightly obscure. It seems that it's evolved over time. It seems that some of the earlier manifestations of it were much more brutal and involved a lot of scarification and more
ritualistic
rites of suffering that were more challenging, and maybe over time it became more celebratory and full of dance and music, but maybe that was always part of it. It's hard to say, because even the way these things are documented changes dramatically over time. But one of the really interesting things about the anti-addictive effects of Ibogaine is that that's not part of the tradition, because there's no tradition of opioid addiction in that region of Central West Africa. That was discovered by a dude in New York City, and there was a heroin addict in New York City named Howard Lotsoff, and he was interested in tripping on an unusual psychedelic. That was pretty much all there was to it. Just he was a heroin addict and he wanted to try a weird psychedelic that a friend of his had, and he tried it. And when he came down, he realized he hadn't used heroin and he hadn't gone into withdrawal. And crucially, that the way that he even thought about heroin had changed. And suddenly it just seemed death-like and unappealing, and he didn't want to use it anymore, and realized that this was a miraculous thing. And
Which it is.
And he dedicated the rest of his life to pursuing this medically. He filed a patent, he became the #1 Ibogaine evangelist. But what's really interesting is, as he's doing all of this, gradually opioid problems do develop in Central West Africa, primarily through the introduction of tramadol from India, where they would press ultra-potent tablets specifically for this West African market, and people became very addicted to this opioid tramadol. And so what I found so interesting is how the tradition in Gabon was evolving to accommodate the introduction of opioids and the new phenomenon of opioid addiction. So this thing that was originally from Central West Africa is modified in New York City, and then those modifications return to Central West Africa. And I find that kind of stuff beautiful.
It is, and it's fascinating. Now, obviously, that begs a lot of new questions, because if you have a seemingly, I mean, there's not a large case here of data, but if you have a seemingly successful drug that can get you off of one of the most addictive drugs that people can't get off, why wouldn't we? And I get okay, Schedule 1 and big pharma, but okay, if there's money to be made by getting people off of heroin, you'd think that there'd be some sort of push to make that a cure, if you will.
Oh, absolutely, and there is. And I think a lot of it has to do with shifting the Overton window, and this happens in all sorts of ways in medicine. It used to be the case that the idea of injecting a drug, unless it was absolutely 100% necessary, was something that a pharmaceutical company would avoid at all costs.
Yes,
they would,
needle phobic.
Many people are.
Yeah.
So the idea was that is a absolute last resort. We might not even want to develop a medicine at all if it needs to be injected. But then suddenly, drugs like Humira and these biologic medications for inflammatory disorders become massive.
Or what are the GLCs?
Yeah. Ozempic, Wegovy, all these sorts of diet drugs as well. And so now you have more and more drugs. It's gradually becoming normalized. Of course, you do an auto-injector. And now the idea of getting an auto-injector instead of a pill is totally normalized. And that happened in 4 or 5 years, something like that. It went from something where it would have been a big deal if you saw someone saying, oh yeah, look, I actually have to inject this drug. You think, whoa, to, of course, you inject the drug. Everyone does that. It's not a big deal. And so I think with psychedelics, there was something similar, where for so long, this idea was like, that's just crazy. That's just too far. We can't do that. We can't possibly use those things as medicines. And then ketamine is approved as an antidepressant, and people are responding pretty well to it. There's some problems, but overall, seems like it's working. Seems like patients like it. Seems like our culture is tolerating it. And
what's a huge story right now, we were talking about it, but for example, young people are using ketamine instead of coke, for example, instead of drinking. It's sort of the drug of choice for raves and stuff. maybe give us a little history of